John had seen a lot of strange things in his life. Tornadoes ripping through the plains, cows escaping their pens and ending up on his front porch, even that one time he swore he saw Old Man Jenkins' tractor driving itself. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared him for the weirdest thing he'd ever laid eyes on. It was sitting right there, just outside his barn, staring at him with huge, glossy eyes. At first, he thought it was some kind of stray animal. Maybe a weird-looking raccoon or a sick coyote. It had soft, dark fur, a long fluffy tail that curled slightly at the tip, and big ears that twitched at the slightest sound. Its tiny hands, yes, hands, not paws, were clasped together as it sat hunched over, shivering slightly. John rubbed the back of his neck. "Well, ain't you a strange little fella?" The creature tilted its head at him, blinking rapidly. John crouched down, careful not to spook it. "You lost or something? Someone's pet?" He looked around, but there was no collar, no tag, nothing to suggest it belonged to anyone. Just a pair of deep violet eyes staring up at him. It was too damn cute. He had no idea what it was, but whatever it was small, cold, and clearly not meant to be out here all alone. With a sigh, he reached out slowly. "All right, Semir. Let's get you warmed up before you freeze." To his surprise, the little thing didn't run away. It hesitated for only a second before stepping forward and placing its tiny hands on his outstretched fingers. Its skin was oddly smooth, almost velvety, and a little warmer than he expected. "Huh," John muttered. "Friendly little guy, ain't ya?" The creature's ears twitched, and its tail fluffed up, but it didn't resist as he scooped it up and cradled it against his chest. It barely weighed anything, like a sack of feathers. John carried it into his house, setting it down on the old couch by the fireplace. The little thing sniffed at the air, then looked at him expectantly. John chuckled. "Guess you must be hungry, huh?" He grabbed a leftover sandwich from the kitchen and tore off a small piece, offering it carefully. The creature took it between its fingers, inspecting it before nibbling. After a few seconds, it perked up and eagerly took another bite. "There you go," John said, amused. "I dunno what kinda animal you are, but you sure ain't picky." As the creature ate, John leaned back and observed it more closely. Its features were too symmetrical, too expressive. The way it looked at him felt almost human. But that was ridiculous. It was probably some rare species of exotic pet someone had lost. Still, as it finished eating and curled up against his side, a nagging feeling tugged at the back of John's mind. Something about this little critter just felt off. The next morning, John woke up to the sensation of something lightly poking his cheek. He groaned and swatted lazily, but the poking persisted. With a grumble, he cracked one eye open. The strange little creature was sitting on his chest, staring at him. John blinked. The creature blinked back. "Mornin'?" he mumbled. Then, in a voice that was far too smooth, far too intelligent, the creature said, "Good morning, human." John's brain completely short-circuited. He sat up so fast that the creature, no, the alien, tumbled off his chest with a startled yelp. His heart hammered in his chest as he scrambled backward, pointing a shaking finger. "Why you can talk?" The fluffy-tailed alien sat up, dusting itself off with an indignant huff. "Of course I can talk. I was simply observing you first." John stared, mouth opening and closing like a fish. "Observing me?" "Yes," the alien said matter-of-factly. "I am Princess Zilia of the Valkyrie Empire. I was conducting research on your primitive agricultural methods when my transport malfunctioned. Your farm was the closest safe location to land." John blinked rapidly, struggling to keep up. You're an alien?" Zilia gave him an unimpressed look. "I just said that, did I not?" John's head spun. This was too much. Too weird. Too impossible. He needed coffee. Without another word, he stumbled into the kitchen, grabbed the coffee pot, and took a long swig straight from it. Only then did he turn back to the alien princess sitting on his couch like it was the most normal thing in the world. "All right," he exhaled. "Let me get this straight. You're an alien princess. You crash-landed near my barn. And I. He winced. I thought you were a lost pet and treated you like one. Zilia's tail twitched. Yes. You fed me, gave me shelter, and even. She hesitated, ears turning a faint shade of blue. Affectionate gestures. John grimaced, recalling all the times he had absent-mindedly patted her head and scratched behind her ears like a dog. Oh, hell, he muttered. I didn't mean no offense by that. Thought you were just some fluffy critter. Zilia folded her arms, tail flicking behind her. It was not unpleasant, she admitted. However, there's something you must understand, human. John gulped. What? Zilia took a deep breath and looked him square in the eye. In Valkyrie culture, caring for a stranded noble, especially one of royal blood, is considered an official marriage proposal. John dropped the coffee pot. It shattered on the floor. He barely noticed. He was too busy having a full-blown existential crisis. Zilia watched his reaction with mild amusement. You seem distressed. Distressed? John sputtered. Lady, I just found out I accidentally proposed to an alien princess. Zilia tilted her head. Would it be preferable if I rejected your proposal? Yes. John shouted. Then hesitated. Wait, no. I mean, hell, I don't know. I wasn't even trying to propose. Zilia nodded thoughtfully. I see. So humans have different customs. John let out a long, exhausted sigh. Yeah. Very different. The alien princess hummed in thought, then suddenly smiled. Very well. I shall allow you time to consider. Consider what? John asked warily. If you wish to honor your accidental proposal, Zilia said simply. Or if you would prefer to flee in terror. John groaned and rubbed his face. He had a feeling his quiet farming life had just taken a turn for the ridiculous. And somehow, he knew it was only going to get weirder from here. The morning sun shone through John's kitchen window, but he barely noticed. His brain was still trying to reboot after the absurd revelation that the small, fluffy creature he had mistaken for a lost pet was actually an alien princess, one who now claimed they were married. John sat at the kitchen table, staring into his coffee like it might offer some kind of divine answer. Across from him, Zilia sat with perfect posture, sipping a glass of water with an almost regal air, her fluffy tail curling around her chair leg. She had made herself comfortable. Too comfortable. John cleared his throat. So, just to clarify. Zilia set her glass down, tilting her head. Yes, husband? John nearly choked on his coffee. Don't call me that. Zilia blinked, confused. But you took me in. You provided food and shelter. In my culture, that is a declaration of intent to form a lifelong bond. Yeah, well, in my culture, it's called being polite. John groaned. You don't just marry someone 'cause they gave you a sandwich. Zilia frowned, her fluffy ears twitching. I see. So human courtship rituals are more complicated. That's one way to put it. John muttered, rubbing his temples. Zilia leaned forward, studying him. If I have misunderstood your customs, I am willing to renegotiate our arrangement. John sighed in relief. Oh, thank God. I shall allow you a courtship period first, she continued. John's relief evaporated. That ain't what I meant. Zilia smiled, as if he hadn't said anything. Yes, yes. We shall follow human traditions. I accept your challenge. It ain't a... John stopped himself. He was talking in circles with a tiny, fluffy alien princess who thought they were engaged. His life had officially gone off the rails. All right, he said, pinching the bridge of his nose. Let's try this another way. Why don't you tell me more about this whole marriage by food rule? Zilia perked up. It is a sacred tradition among my people. If a Valkyrie noble finds themselves stranded or in distress, the first person to provide them sustenance and protection is seen as a worthy mate. It signifies care, strength, and the ability to provide stability. John frowned. That's kinda sweet, actually. But what if someone just does it to be nice, like I did? Zilia's ears drooped slightly. Ah. That is uncommon. Most who offer aid to my kind do so knowing the significance. It is a great honor. John sighed. Well, hate to break it to ya, princess, but I had no clue. She regarded him thoughtfully. So, you wish to annul our union? Yes. John hesitated. I mean, not that I got a problem with you or nothing, but we just met. Zilia nodded slowly. I understand. It would be unfair to force you into a lifelong commitment without consideration. Exactly. She smiled. Very well. You shall have a trial period instead. John frowned. A what? A trial period of marriage. Zilia clapped her hands together, looking pleased. 1 lunar cycle should be sufficient. If you find yourself unsatisfied with our arrangement, we may discuss alternatives. John groaned. That ain't how this works. Is that not how human courtships work? Zilia asked, feigning innocence. Do you not live together, learn about one another, and test compatibility? John opened his mouth to argue, but damn it, she wasn't wrong. That's not the point, he said weakly. Zilia only smiled. Then it is settled. For the next cycle, I shall be your wife in trial. John buried his face in his hands. This is a nightmare. The nightmare got worse by lunchtime. John had planned to go about his usual farm chores, but Zilia had insisted on accompanying him. The problem? She had no idea how anything worked. You ride these creatures? She asked, eyeing his horse with suspicion. Yeah, John said, adjusting the saddle. Zilia narrowed her violet eyes. It is large. That's kinda the point. She stepped closer, examining the horse from different angles. Finally, she turned back to John, placing a hand on her hip. I shall ride this beast as well. It is my duty as your trial wife to partake in your daily life. John snorted. Lady, I don't think you're tall enough to reach the stirrups. Zilia puffed up, her fluffy ears twitching in offense. Nonsense! I am more than capable. John just shook his head. All right, go ahead. Knock yourself out. Zilia took a determined stance, placed her hands on the saddle, and jumped. She didn't even make it halfway. John bit his lip, trying not to laugh as she landed unceremoniously on her back, staring up at the sky. I meant to do that, she said. John let out a bark of laughter. Sure you did. Zilia sat up, ears flicking. Then, without warning, she leaped onto him, clinging to his back like a koala. John staggered. What the hell? If I cannot ride the beast, she declared, then I shall ride you. John groaned. This is not how riding works. But Zilia only grinned, drumming her fingers on his shoulders. Onward, my husband mount. John sighed. This is gonna be a long trial period. By the time the sun was setting, John was exhausted. Between Zilia's stubbornness, endless curiosity, and complete lack of understanding of basic human tasks, he barely got any work done. Back inside the house, Zilia flopped onto the couch with a dramatic sigh. Your primitive labor is tiring. John rolled his eyes. Yeah, welcome to farmin'. Zilia stretched, her tail curling around herself. Perhaps I have judged humans too harshly. You may not have advanced technology, but your endurance is impressive. John gave her a flat look. Gee, thanks. Zilia smiled sleepily. I shall allow you to rest. You have earned it, dear husband. John groaned. Stop calling me that. But you are my trial husband, she said, her eyes twinkling with mischief. John opened his mouth to argue but gave up. There was no winning with this woman. Instead, he grabbed a blanket, tossed it over her, and muttered, Good night, princess. Zilia blinked up at him. Then, to his surprise, she let out a small, pleased hum and snuggled deeper into the couch. John sighed, rubbing the back of his neck as he headed to his bedroom. 1 month, he told himself. Just gotta survive 1 month. Somehow, he doubted it was gonna be that easy. The next morning, John woke up to an unfamiliar weight on his chest. Blinking against the early morning light, he looked down, only to find Zelia sprawled across him like a contented cat. Her soft, fluffy ears twitched slightly as she snored, her tail draped lazily over his arm. John froze. How the hell did she get in my bed? Carefully, he tried to shift her off, but the moment he moved, Zelia made a sleepy noise and curled tighter against him. Warm, she murmured. John's brain short-circuited. He was a grown man. He dealt with all kinds of farm emergencies. But this was new territory. Zelia, he whispered, poking her shoulder. She let out a tiny grumble, her fluffy tail flicking. 5 more minutes, husband. John nearly flipped her off the bed. Instead, he settled for groaning loudly. For the last time, I ain't your husband. Zelia finally cracked open one sleepy violet eye. Not yet. John exhaled through his nose. All right, that's it. Off. With one swift motion, he grabbed her by the waist and lifted her like she weighed nothing. Zelia let out a surprised squeak, her ears flattening, but she didn't resist as he plopped her onto the floor. She blinked up at him, sitting cross-legged. That was oddly thrilling. John pinched the bridge of his nose. Woman, what the hell were you doing in my bed? Zelia stretched, completely unbothered. I grew cold during the night and sought warmth. You were the most viable heat source. John gaped at her. That ain't an excuse. She tilted her head. Are you not my trial husband? That ain't how trial marriages work. Zelia just gave him an innocent look. Oh? And how do human trial marriages work then? John opened his mouth. Closed it. Then groaned. There was no winning with this woman. Fine. New rule. He jabbed a finger at her. No sneaking into my bed. Zelia sighed dramatically, but she nodded. Very well. I shall honor your boundary, my dearest husband-to-be. John nearly threw a pillow at her. Later that morning, John was back to his usual chores, this time, making sure to assign Zelia simple tasks so she wouldn't cause more damage than she helped. The result? She was following him around like a tiny, fluffy menace. Why must you cover your plants with these sheets? Zelia asked, watching as John laid protective fabric over the crops. Frost's comin', he explained. These keep the plants from freezing overnight. Zelia hummed, thoughtful. My people utilize climate-controlled domes for such purposes. John snorted. Yeah, well, not all of us got fancy space domes. Zelia placed a hand on her hip. Would you like one? John blinked. What? As my future husband, I could provide many benefits, she said smoothly. Advanced technology, agricultural improvements, space travel. Stop trying to bribe me into marriage. Zelia pouted. I am simply presenting incentives. John groaned. No incentives. Zelia's tail flicked. Are you certain? My people's energy shields could protect your livestock from predators. Our water filtration systems would triple your crop yield. Oh. And our grav lifts would eliminate the need for manual labor. John slapped a hand over her mouth. Enough! Zelia's violet eyes twinkled mischievously. Then, to his horror, she licked his palm. John recoiled. What the hell? Zelia just smirked. Told you, I play to win. John threw his hands in the air. I give up. By midday, things only got worse. Zelia had taken an interest in the chickens. John found her crouched in the coop, eyeing them with a calculating expression. The birds clucked nervously, clearly sensing something not right about the alien woman staring them down. Do I even want to know? John asked. Zelia pointed at the rooster. That one challenged me. John pinched the bridge of his nose. It's a chicken. Zelia narrowed her eyes. He stared at me. John sighed. Lady, if you start a war with my livestock, I swear to God. Before he could finish, the rooster flapped its wings and lunged at her. Zelia yelped and stumbled back, tail puffing up like an angry cat. John nearly collapsed laughing. The beast has chosen combat, Zelia shouted. John wiped a tear from his eye. Yup. He does that. Zelia squared her shoulders, determined. Very well. I accept his challenge. Zelia, no. Too late. Zelia lunged forward. The rooster lunged back. What followed was the most ridiculous standoff John had ever witnessed. A tiny alien princess engaged in a full-on, one-sided battle with a barnyard bird. She was losing. Badly. The rooster, completely unbothered by her supposed nobility, chased her out of the coop. She scrambled over the fence, tail fluffed up in defeat, while John howled with laughter. Panting, she turned to him. That creature is a demon, John wheezed. Yeah. That's Cluck Norris. Zelia stared. You have named the beast? John wiped his face, still laughing. Damn right I have. Zelia placed her hands on her hips. Then as your trial wife, I shall train in secret and reclaim my honor. John shook his head, grinning. Good luck with that. That evening, John found himself watching Zelia as she sat on the porch, staring at the stars. For all her stubbornness, ridiculous antics, and outright refusal to take no for an answer, she looked strangely peaceful like this. You miss home? He asked. Zelia glanced at him, then back at the sky. Perhaps a little. John sat beside her. What's it like? She smiled softly. Larger cities. Towering structures of crystalline metal. Skies that shimmer in different colors. But, she hesitated. It is also lonely at times. John frowned. Lonely? Zelia toyed with the edge of her sleeve. Many nobles marry for status. For alliances. Rarely for companionship. John studied her. For all her teasing and relentless pursuit of their trial marriage, there was a truth hidden beneath it all. Well, he said after a moment, nudging her with his elbow. If nothing else, you got me to laugh today. Zelia blinked, then smiled, really smiled. Then my efforts were not wasted. John rolled his eyes. Yeah? They sat in silence for a while, watching the stars. John wasn't sure what he was getting himself into. But damn it, maybe this trial marriage wasn't as terrible as he thought. The next few days on the farm were interesting. Zelia had mostly stopped trying to bribe John into marriage. Only mostly. She still dropped hints about how her people's technology could improve his farm, but she hadn't tried sneaking into his bed again, so John counted that as a win. But today, he had a new problem. Zelia had taken an interest in cooking. I do not understand, she muttered, holding a wooden spoon like it was a foreign weapon. Humans do not consume raw meat. John, who was in the middle of fixing a broken chair, looked up in horror. Please tell me you haven't been eating raw meat. Zelia frowned. It is perfectly acceptable among my kind. John ran a hand down his face. All right, rule number 2, no eatin' raw meat. Zelia's tail flicked in mild annoyance. Fine. Then I shall prepare a meal your way. John immediately regretted everything. 30 minutes later, his kitchen was a disaster zone. Zelia stood at the center of the chaos, covered in flour, eggshells, and what he hoped wasn't charred alien slime. The stove was smoking, the sink was full of unrecognizable debris, and his dog had retreated under the table for safety. John stared. Zelia looked at him expectantly. It is done. What is it? She gestured at a vaguely pie-shaped object on the counter. It wobbled. John swallowed. Eat, she commanded. John glanced at his dog for support. The dog refused to make eye contact. Slowly, hesitantly, he picked up a fork and took a tiny bite. It was not food. The texture was wrong. The taste was a crime. The aftertaste was a war crime. John struggled to keep his expression neutral. Zelia, darlin', what did you put in this? Zelia perked up, proud. I followed a human recipe. Sugar, eggs, flour, and for a richer taste, I added nutrient paste from my ship. John choked. Your what? Nutrient paste. She tapped her chin. It is composed of essential proteins, amino acids, and enhanced digestive compounds for optimal consumption. John's stomach turned. Lady, did you just mix space goo with pie? Zelia blinked. Should I not have? John set the fork down very carefully. All right. New rule, no cooking without supervision. Zelia huffed. I was merely trying to prepare something for my future husband. For the last time. John rubbed his temples. I ain't your husband. Zelia's ears twitched. Not yet. John exhaled through his nose. You are gonna be the death of me. Later that evening, John sat outside on the porch, letting the cool night air wash away the stress of the day. Zelia joined him, unusually quiet. He glanced at her. You all right? She hesitated, tail curling around herself. I am unused to failure. John raised a brow. Failure? She nodded. I trained in diplomacy, combat, and leadership. I mastered strategy, navigation, and politics. But today I could not even prepare a simple meal. John softened. Hey now, don't beat yourself up. She let out a long sigh. Perhaps I am not suited for this trial marriage after all. John frowned. For all her antics, Zelia had genuinely been trying to adjust. She'd helped, even if she caused more trouble than good, and she'd been earnest in her attempts to learn human ways. And, well, John realized he didn't actually hate having her around. Tell you what, he said, nudging her shoulder. You stick to what you are good at. I'll teach you what you ain't. Deal? Zelia's ears perked slightly. You would train me? John smirked. Think of it as a trial farming apprenticeship. Zelia considered this. Then, to his surprise, she smiled. A real smile. Very well, husband-to-be, she said teasingly. I accept your terms. John rolled his eyes, but he didn't argue this time. Maybe, just maybe, he was starting to get used to her. The next few days passed in a strange sort of harmony. John had begrudgingly accepted that Zelia wasn't going anywhere, so he put her to work in ways she couldn't ruin. She was surprisingly efficient at sorting produce, organizing tools, and even handling some of the farm's minor bookkeeping. But the biggest surprise? She actually listened when he taught her things. Sure, she still teased him endlessly about their so-called trial marriage, but there was something different in the way she behaved now. She wasn't just messing with him, she genuinely wanted to learn. And John, well, he found himself getting used to her. Maybe even liking having her around. But of course, peace never lasted long with Zelia. It all started when the officials came knocking. John was in the middle of fixing a fence post when he heard the sound of an approaching vehicle, an official-looking transport kicking up dust as it rolled down his dirt road. John frowned, wiping his hands on his jeans. Now who the hell could that be? The answer came when two uniformed men stepped out, their badges gleaming under the afternoon sun. Government. Great. John sighed and walked up to meet them. Something I can help y'all with? One of the officials, a tall man with graying hair, gave him a stiff nod. Are you John Carter? John's frown deepened. Yeah. The second man, younger and carrying a clipboard, glanced at the farmhouse. We received reports of an unidentified non-human entity residing on this property. John's gut sank. Zelia. Of course someone had noticed her running around, and of course the government would come poking around. Keeping his face neutral, John shrugged. Don't know what you're talking about. The older official raised a brow. You're saying there isn't an extraterrestrial present on this farm? John crossed his arms. Nope. The younger one flipped a page on his clipboard. So if we were to inspect the premises, we wouldn't find any trace of... Husband! I have returned with eggs. John internally cursed. There, standing proudly on the porch, was Zelia, holding a basket of freshly gathered eggs and smiling like she hadn't just blown her own cover. The two officials stared. Zelia blinked, noticing them. Ah. Who are these men? John clenched his jaw. Just some folks asking stupid questions. The older official's mouth twitched. Sir, is that? Nope, John said immediately. The younger one cleared his throat. She just called you husband. Zelia tilted her head. Is that incorrect? John groaned. For the last time. Husband-to-be, Zelia corrected smoothly. Our union is still in the trial phase. John pinched the bridge of his nose. Lady, you are gonna be the death of me. The older official rubbed his temple. Sir, you do realize that harboring an undocumented extraterrestrial is a serious offense? Zelia's tail flicked. I am not undocumented. The officials turned to her. Zelia crossed her arms. I filed my arrival papers through the Intergalactic Diplomatic Council before landing. I am legally residing under trial marriage observation, as per my planet's customs. John's brain short-circuited. The officials looked equally stunned. Wait, the younger one said, flipping through his papers. We do have an active trial marriage program with certain alien species, but... Zelia gave him a pointed look. Exactly? The older official sighed. Do you have documentation? Zelia smirked and pulled a sleek hollow device from her belt. With a tap, a glowing screen appeared, showing an official-looking document with stamps, seals, and a lot of bureaucratic nonsense. The officials examined it. The younger one frowned. It does check out. The older one shook his head. Unbelievable. He turned to John. Did you know about this? John rubbed his face. Do I look like I knew about this? The official sighed again. Sir, as long as the paperwork is in order, we have no legal grounds to remove her. However, he shot John a look. You are technically in a government-recognized trial marriage. John choked. The younger official nodded. If you don't formally reject the trial within the next 30 days, it will be considered legally binding. John's entire soul left his body. What? Zelia's ears twitched. Oh, what a shame, she said, utterly smug. I suppose we'll just have to see how things unfold. John glared at her. You planned this. Zelia's smile was all teeth. I always play to win. The officials, clearly done with this nonsense, handed John a formal notice and left. John watched them drive away, still reeling. Trial marriage. Legally binding. 30 days. He turned to Zelia, who looked entirely too pleased with herself. John exhaled sharply. You tricked me. Zelia tilted her head. Did I? John groaned. Woman, I swear. She stepped closer, tail swishing. Oh, relax, husband-to-be. John scowled. I ain't your husband. Zelia smirked. You will be. John sighed. He should have known he never stood a damn chance.